The greatest healer in the ancient world could not heal himself. Chiron trained Achilles in battle and philosophy, guided Asclepius toward the arts of medicine, and counselled Heracles through his labours. Every hero who shaped Greek civilization passed through Chiron's care, yet Chiron himself carried a wound that never closed. The one who healed everyone around him lived in permanent, irreversible pain. This is not tragedy, this is a pattern, and it is not ancient history, it is your story. Welcome to Power and Myth. Chiron was not like other centaurs. In the Greek mythological tradition, centaurs were creatures of appetite, violence, and chaos. They disrupted feasts. They could not be reasoned with. Chiron stood apart from his kind not by accident, but by lineage and by nature. He was the son of the Titan Kronos, half divine, and he carried something the other centaurs did not, the capacity to hold wisdom and wildness in the same body without being destroyed by the tension. He lived on Mount Pelion, where he taught in a cave, and what he taught was not mere martial skill. He taught the medicinal properties of plants, the movements of stars, the ethics of care, and the arts of music. He was, in the most literal sense, a civilizing force. Not because he had suppressed what was animal in him, but because he had learned to work with it. The wound came by accident. During a gathering at the home of the centaur Pholus, Heracles wounded Chiron with an arrow. It was not intended. The arrow was tipped with the blood of the Lernaean hydra, a poison for which there was no antidote. Chiron, who had spent his life studying the healing properties of every plant on the mountain, could not heal the wound in his own flesh. He was immortal. He could not die and be released from the pain. He could not cure himself and be restored. He could only endure. He carried the open wound for years, continuing to teach, continuing to guide, continuing to heal others, whilst the wound in his own body refused to close. When Prometheus was bound to the rock, suffering his own endless punishment, Chiron made a choice. He offered his immortality in exchange for Prometheus's freedom. He chose to die, not from despair, but because the wound had taught him something that most healers never learn. There are forms of pain that cannot be cured. They can only be given meaning. Carl Jung understood Chiron, not as myth, but as psychological reality. Jung spent years of his life in what he later described as a confrontation with the unconscious, a period of inner dissolution that he believed would have destroyed him had he not already possessed the conceptual tools to understand what was happening. Those tools were themselves the product of his own wound. Jung had spent years treating patients with psychotic breaks, with profound dissociation, with experiences of inner fragmentation that the medicine of his time had no framework to address. He had also, in his break with Freud, experienced his own collapse, his own dark period, his own encounter with the material that lives beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. He wrote about this in the Red Book. He recorded the visions, the voices, the figures that emerged from his depths during those years of inner crisis. And what emerged from that encounter was analytical psychology, the framework of archetypes, the concept of the collective unconscious, and the understanding of shadow integration. His wound became the basis of his life's work, not despite the wound, because of it. Jung named this pattern the wounded healer. He observed it first in the clinical relationship, noting that the therapist's unresolved wounds did not disappear simply because the therapist had been trained. They became active in the therapeutic encounter. They shaped what the therapist could tolerate in the patient, what they could not see, where they unconsciously moved away from the truth rather than toward it. The unexamined wound became the blind spot, and the blind spot, Jung understood, was not merely a professional liability, it was the precise location where the healer's deepest gift was still trapped, still unavailable, still locked behind the door that had not yet been opened. What the ancients called Chiron's unhealing wound, Jung understood as the unexamined wound of the introverted intuition-dominant mind. The pattern is the same, only the language has changed. You recognize this. You have always recognized this. Because this is not the history of a figure from another time, this is the pattern you are living. The wounded healer is one of the 7 INFJ archetypes, and it is perhaps the most structurally complex of them. Here is why. The gifts that define the wounded healer archetype are rooted in introverted intuition operating at depth. NI does not read the surface of things, it reads a pattern beneath the surface. In the context of others' inner lives, this means that the INFJ with the wounded healer archetype does not simply sense that someone is in pain. They sense the shape of the pain, its origin, the story it is telling about itself, the thing it is asking for but cannot name. This capacity is not metaphysical. It is a measurable feature of NI-dominant cognition, the ability to synthesize unconscious pattern data into coherent insight. What seems like the INFJ simply knowing things about people is introverted intuition processing depth information faster than language can track. It is what made Chiron such a teacher. He did not instruct from theory, he instructed from knowledge that can only be acquired by having been broken and having slowly learned to carry the breaking. But the wounded healer has a specific blind spot, and it is structural, not accidental. They are oriented outward. The same NI that reads other people's depths does not naturally turn inward to examine their own with the same quality of attention, or when it does, it tends to read the wound analytically from a clinical distance, as a healer might examine a patient through glass, not as something being felt in real time, as something being catalogued from outside. The wound is observed, it is not inhabited. And this distinction matters because shadow integration, in the Jungian sense, requires not just the intellectual mapping of the wound, but genuine contact with it. The wounded healer INFJ often knows their wound in extraordinary conceptual detail. They can trace its origins, name its patterns, articulate its effects on their relationships and their choices. And yet something remains at a remove. Something has not yet been turned toward, and met with the same quality of presence they have spent years giving to others. There is a wound that runs through the wounded healer lineage with particular consistency. It is the wound of the one who was needed before they were ready, the child who learned to read the emotional atmosphere of the home because safety required it, the young person who became the confidant, the counselor, the one to whom others brought their heaviness before they had been given sufficient care themselves. They developed the gift under pressure. The sensitivity deepened not because it was nurtured in safety, but because it was required in difficulty. And the pressure left a mark, not a mark of weakness, a mark of cost. The cost of having oriented outward so early and so consistently that inward orientation became unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. The cost of having learned that others' pain was the relevant signal, whilst their own registered as background noise. This is not dysfunction, it is adaptation. But adaptation carries a weight, and the wounded healer who has not yet named this particular weight is carrying it without knowing its shape. Jung's observation about the clinical relationship applies here with precision. The unexamined wound does not disappear, it becomes active. It surfaces in the patterns of who you help and why, in the people you are drawn toward, the dynamics you recreate, the moments when your own need for care becomes so loud it can no longer be suppressed and emerges sideways, in exhaustion, in sudden withdrawal, in the feeling of having given everything and having nothing left. The shadow of the wounded healer is not cruelty or indifference, it is the unexamined assumption that your own wound is secondary, that attending to it is somehow self-indulgent in a way that attending to others' wounds is not, that the healer does not also get to be the one who needs healing. What does it mean to turn toward your own wound? Not to be consumed by it, not to perform healing as a project, cataloguing insights about your childhood with the same efficiency you bring to understanding everyone else's, but to give it the same quality of presence you have spent a lifetime giving to the wounds of others. Chiron's wound could not be healed, but it could be honoured. He could not cure himself, but he could choose what to do with the permanence of it. His sacrifice was not despair. It was the act of someone who had learned that a wound can be made meaningful even when it cannot be made to close. That is the inheritance, not the pain itself. The capacity to carry pain with dignity and to place it in the service of something larger than personal survival. You have been doing this your whole life. The only invitation now is to include yourself in the circle of those you are willing to heal, to turn toward your own depths with the same quality of attention you have always brought to others, not because it will fix you, but because you are not function. You are the continuation of a lineage that knew the wound was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the most important chapter. If something in this landed, I want to know which moment found you. Tell me in the comments, when did you first realize that your ability to read other people's pain had a cost you had never fully named? The wounded healer lineage does not end with Chiron. It continues in every person who has ever sat with another human being in their darkness and known exactly what to do whilst quietly carrying their own. Subscribe to Power and Myth, where we keep tracing the ancient patterns that explain who you are and what you carry. Until next time, find your power, know your myth.